Everybody in New York City, in New York State, has the right to a habitable apartment.
The water in my kitchen sink is only lukewarm, never hot. I've complained several times over the last 6 months and nothing has happened. Can I ask for a rent abatement? Also, if I complain again, can they raise my rent even more in retaliation when I re-sign my lease? And they add, I'm in a luxury building. Sam, what's your advice here?
Well, let's start with this. First of all, the person asking the question is probably not a rent stabilized tenant. Everybody in New York City, in New York State, has the right to a habitable apartment. There is something called the warranty of habitability that covers every single apartment. It essentially says that apartments have to be free of conditions dangerous to life, health, and safety, but that is very, very broadly construed. So not having hot water would be considered a breach of the warranty of habitability. There is also a minimum temperature required for hot water. It is in the New York City Housing and Maintenance Code. So if you're not getting hot water, yes, you should be entitled to a rent abatement. How much? Very hard to tell. 15%, 20%, somewhere in that range, because, it affects your ability to shower and shave and do all those other things. While New York State has these wonderful laws that prohibit retaliation and that prohibit a landlord from not renewing a lease or evicting a tenant in retaliation for their complaining, or even raising the rent unconscionably in retaliation, I have found that enforcing a retaliatory eviction case is very, very difficult in court. It's very, very hard to prove, even though the law creates a presumption that if within 6 months of a complaint, the landlord acts in a retaliatory manner, it's still very hard to prove. In other words, let's say the landlord refuses to renew the lease or raises the rent to some amount you don't want to pay, and you end up in court and you defend the case based on retaliatory eviction. If you win, all you get is a 1-year lease. At the end of that 1-year lease, the landlord's retaliatory motive is deemed to have been purged, is the word. So why fight? Why pay a lawyer? Why spend thousands of dollars? Why spend hours in court fighting for something that's only going to get you another year in the apartment? This is the kind of issue that it's better to respond with numbers. If this is affecting other tenants in the building, as a problem with hot water typically would, get a few of your neighbors together and deal with it collectively. It makes you much harder to be picked off that way.
Okay, so that's actually really good advice for other issues or in the building.
Mm-hmm. Now, if this person were stabilized, then they wouldn't have to worry about retaliation in the sense of they would still have to have their lease renewed. They couldn't have their rent increased beyond what rent stabilization allows. And so this is a perfect example of how a stabilized tenant can be much more confident in enforcing their rights than a non-stabilized tenant.
Because in a rent stabilized situation, your renewal is guaranteed. Yeah,
that's correct. And you can, yes, you at a very modest increase, whatever the current guidelines are. So it's much safer if you're a stabilized tenant to complain about conditions.